see what's going on. Hey guys on YouTube, sorry we're starting a little late. Having a little trouble connecting with Shakir to jump online, so I'm really hoping that we'll still be able to do that. Otherwise, I might just end up changing what we're doing today. Right now, I'm on both live on YouTube with you guys, and I'm live on TikTok as well, because I actually have more followers on that than anything. You YouTube followers need to follow me more. So I guess what I'm going to do is just kind of an open Q&A until maybe Shakir hopefully is able to join us. I'm going to try every once in a while to try to message him or get a hold of him, but I'm not seeing anything. I don't know if we just ran into some miscommunication, but it seemed like he messaged me saying he was about to get on, and then I lost him. So I don't know really what's going on. But for now, I guess, if you guys have questions on YouTube or on TikTok, go ahead and throw those in there, and maybe we can just have a discussion that way and make the most of this. So sorry that didn't go as planned. I guess these sort of things happen every now and then. So if you have a question, especially on TikTok, because the chat goes a little crazy on TikTok for me to keep up with it, and I'm not going to scroll through everything. If you have a question on TikTok, please put it in like that question option. I think you can actually like somehow put it so that I can actually click on it and just see all the Q&A questions. If you're on YouTube, I'm not seeing a ton of people on right now, so you can just put it into that thread of questions there, and then we can get going that way. I'm just going to send a quick message to Shakir here and see if he can join us a little bit late. Otherwise, we'll just roll with this instead. So let me just do this real quick, reply to him, and see if we can get him. All right. So first question I'm seeing over YouTube is, why do you not believe in Islam? Maybe you put it in both. Maybe it's the same person. I would say ultimately because I see a lot of historically confirmed facts. Aha! Here we go. Here it comes. We'll have to table that.
Hi, Noah.
Hey, Shakir, how are you?
I'm doing well. Sorry about the delay. I'm just, I'll be on camera in just a second.
No worries. I'll just do a little introduction while you're getting your last little bit set up. So, those of you who are just joining us over YouTube, I'm doing a series now on my YouTube channel wanting to basically get through the basics of every world religion and its views on 8 issues. Heaven, hell, the nature of God, nature of man, sin, salvation, and the fall. I think these are questions and these are doctrinal issues that every religion has a view of. And I think those ultimately differentiate those religions from other religions and also define those religions really well. And so I think this is a really good place to start for anyone who's wanting to learn world religions, and ultimately this is something that I'm hoping to maybe even turn into a book eventually. It's just a really great outline of all these different world religions. I've studied world religions quite a bit, both for my undergrad, for my master's degree, and a lot of personal time. But I still think the best way to learn about another religion is not to just read the books even written by followers of those religions, but to have real conversations with people that follow them. And so with that, a couple of weeks ago, I talked with someone from the Baha'i faith, and then this week we are meeting with Shakir, and Shakir and I met 3 years ago or so, and he is one of the imams at the local Islamic center here in Fort Collins, Colorado, where we both live. And we met because I was doing a class on Islam, and one of my assignments was that I needed to meet with someone who was from the Islamic faith. And so that's why we are meeting together here. So Shakir, we're really excited to have you join us today. I don't know if there's any chance, would you be able to maybe rotate, or actually no, that works fine with the way that my my thing edits it, that'll work great. I can just move your picture down a little bit, and we'll be good to go.
Okay.
So,
Is that good?
why don't you move yourself like down in the picture, if that makes sense? I got like the top of your forehead cut off.
Sure. Okay. All right. Let's see here.
Yeah, that's pretty good. Sweet.
Okay.
All right. So, I don't know if there's anything more that you wanted to add to that, Shakir, of things that you think everybody should kind of know about you. Obviously, we want to even hear a little bit of your story of how you became Muslim, um, and that sort of thing. But anything else you want to add that you think everybody should know about you as well?
Sure. I think that's a totally appropriate way to start. As you said, my name is Shakir Muhammad. I'm affiliated with the Islamic Center of Fort Collins here in Fort Collins, Colorado. I've been a volunteer and a voted in member or executive member at the Islamic Center for Collins for voted position for perhaps almost 10 years now. And I've been living in Fort Collins since December 31st, 1999. I came from New Jersey. I am a father of two boys named Abdullah and Yusuf, age 17 and 13. And my great other half, Saras or Sedra Muhammad. We've been married since I've arrived in town, just about after I arrived in town. Husband, father of two, worker here in Fort Collins, and a volunteer at the Islamic Center. Also voted in as the president of the Islamic Center for Collins and performing duties of the Imam at the Islamic Center for Collins. And I've also a coordinator for the Colorado Imam Council. So that basically is a collective of all the mosque leaders in the state, and we come together on different issues, but primarily the one unifying topic that we have is the start and the end of the fasting month of Ramadan. That's the one thing that we come together every year on to officiate and to preside over. Father, husband, imam here at the local Islamic Center, and coordinator for the Colorado Imam Council.
Awesome. Great. So we'll go ahead and let me even first start with, I'd love to have you even share with us a little bit of like your story. I know you were raised Muslim, but that wasn't your parents' story, so that even kind of filters into that as an interesting part.
Sure. So I guess my story basically is how I got to be, fulfilling the role of Imam at the Islamic Center for Collins. Is of course starts with my family story, my parents' story of them converting to Islam. So they grew up Christian in Baptist churches in New Jersey, and I am Black or African American, and the experience as themselves being Black Americans growing up in America, and especially changing their faith in the era of the civil rights era. Things were going on in America that made them look at themselves, look at their belief, and which caused them to rethink or to find something that suited them and their mindset and actually what they're going through in life also. And so them looking for a faith, they chose Islam. So they converted to Islam, my mother and father. I'm one of 8 children, and they subsequently raised us in the Muslim faith. And early on in my life, I was very active, or my parents were active in the Islamic Center there in New Jersey. So from a young age, I was doing community service, helping those who were needy, helping those who needed help. My father was I guess you could say, a pioneer in the community there, basically doing goodly works for those who needed help. And so that's the place where I saw the work, I guess, activity, community service being done, and the needs of the mosque being fulfilled by my father, my family. And so I followed suit in that task or those tasks. And I started, probably the first sermon that I gave was, I believe, somewhere close to the age of maybe 19 or so, at the small mosque or prayer, or there's another word for mosque, it's a musalla, but there's a small prayer hall that was close to our family home in New Jersey, and I probably the first sermon that I gave was perhaps at the age of 19, and so I don't have a a I guess a what do you call it a
background or training. Is that
yeah
maybe
so
what
I
you're
don't
getting to?
as an imam or a religiously learned person. And in Islam itself, there's a phrase that there is no priesthood in Islam, but there is definitely a level of people who have knowledge and who are acting on the knowledge they have, and those who are opposite to that. So basically, to be an imam in the most general sense, it is that a person would know the most of the Quran, the holy book of Islam, and to be the one to act upon it the most. So it isn't like, if someone says, well, I memorized the whole entire Quran, but my actions are opposite to that, then that person wouldn't be seen as the imam to the local people. But it's that you memorize aspects of the faith and you live it also. So the person who does that the most, or even by age, or even by availability. I mean, you could have the most learned person to be a surgeon, and he's on call, for most days of the week, so he cannot fulfill the duties of the imam. So typically, of course, in the community, they pick the one who was the most knowledgeable and who applied that faith. And after that, it's simply who can fulfill the job. So again, there's no priesthood, but still communities like to have certain traits or characteristics in their imam. So for example, in the US, you pretty much cannot be imam if you don't speak English. So that would be a criteria for being imam in most communities in the U.S. So there are local language, cultural things that are sought for in an imam, but primarily the one who knows the most Quran or the most religious text and applies it. So based on that loose criteria, then the community then selects the person who is best fit for them. But if you have a Muslim nation, like for example, Indonesia, then it could be that the government would select someone, the Islamic ministry, the religious ministry would select someone who would be the imam at their local mosque in the country. And that might be a certain criteria also, as they have certainly Islamic universities and colleges there, then they might require a person to have a degree in theology or Islamic law and so on. But so I don't have I don't have a trained background, but people in this community have designated me to fulfill the role of the imam and also voted me to be president. So from an early age, I was working in the mosque, doing deeds for the community, and now I'm, here in Fort Collins doing this.
Gotcha. So speaking or preaching that early, is that common? I'm just curious.
It's happened, but it's not very common. Part of it simply is that sometimes you'd have, so in the US, there is one major organization of Islamic centers in the US called ISNA, that stands for Islamic Circle of America. Islamic Society of North America. And there's also ICNA, Islamic Circle of North America. So there's Islamic Society, and the Islamic Circle of North America. And they have, they kind of have guidelines for running the mosque. They kind of give example of how you might want to present the speeches. They have websites that have religious information on them, how to structure your center, and all things like that. And also they help the organizations also. And they also do charitable work. So for example, several years ago, there was a flood that happened in the Big Thompson River. So ICNA, I believe it was ICNA, Islamic Circle of North America, they sent out volunteers from the national organization to help the local mosque and its neighbors in Boulder with the preparation or the post flood kind of reconstruction. So they do charitable works and they give you ideas for organizing your mosque, but it's not required. So basically, they set a framework, and whoever wants to abide by that framework, they can, or even loosely, that's also possible. But anyhow, ISNA, so they're the biggest ISNA, ICNA, they're the two biggest Islamic organizations in America. And if you follow their guidelines, that's great. If you don't, that's fine too. But they're the two longest standing organizations that help people set up their mosque and run efficiently as they can.
Gotcha. Okay. So first question, kind of just getting into the actual stuff. Could you tell us just kind of the history? Yeah, go ahead.
I'm sorry. And the question, sorry, is it common? Sorry about that. So you have these organizations, they basically help mosque move along. And sometimes you can have a structure where perhaps me and Noah, we started a mosque in a 50 miles north of Fort Collins. And it's just basically based on what we want to do. So both of us opened it up. We both hired an imam who we want to, pick from North America. So it's sort of like it's left up to the community. And if the community gives the people, and especially the youth, the ability to lead and guide and also learn initially, then that's the type of the community that would give a younger person the ability to preside over a community in some small fashion, whether it's helping charitable activities, working in the mosque or volunteering in the mosque, or actually giving speeches. So it happens, but it's not too common just because of the internal politics of mosques.
Gotcha. Okay. All right. So getting into the first question there, could you just tell us, like, really briefly, like maybe 5-minute synopsis of how Islam got started?
So how Islam got started. So we believe that Islam is the religion that God has desired for mankind to follow. And the person who follows Islam is a Muslim. So in Arabic, that's a language of Islam today. With the sending of the Prophet Muhammad, the language of the Quran is Arabic. So the person who is Muslim is a person who Islams. So instead of saying Islamer with ER at the end, in Arabic, the MU is the ER. So it's Mu Islam. So someone who is an Islamer is a Mu Islam Muslim. So Islam started, we would believe, or we would say that Islam started with, as far as the human form, with the creation of Adam, the first man and his mate Hawa or Eve. But even prior to that, Islam did exist, and for the creation that God had created, Islam was a way of life. And simply that is that a person submits their will to God and they follow God's commands in their life to the utmost of their ability. And if they fall short, then they are to repent to God. But Islam was the religion of God that was always to be followed. And with the prophets and messengers that were sent, they were all sent to remind mankind to follow the godly way and leave off idolatry and going away from the path of the previous prophet and messenger that was sent. But at this time, Muslims often do say, or even historians say, Islam began with the advent of the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, who lived close to 1480 years ago. So that's the era that we live in, and that's the prophet that we follow at this time. So it could be said that, this era of Islam started in Arabia with the sending of the Prophet Muhammad. But again, all the prophets and messengers were sent with the message of Islam.
Gotcha.
So say that Jesus was sent with the message of Islam to worship God alone and leave off idolatry. Moses was sent with the message of Islam, telling his people to leave off idolatry and worship God alone and so.
Got it. Okay. So with that, I think, obviously, like, that's clearly the Islamic view. From outside, we kind of see it as more of when Muhammad comes along. So could you tell more of the story there? Obviously, understanding that from an Islamic standpoint, that's really not the start of Islam.
Sure.
But how does his story come in, and especially the founding, and how did the Quran itself come about?
Thanks for that. So we believe that Prophet Muhammad was born in Arabia, or what is known as Saudi Arabia today. And in his early life, he was raised by his tribal family members, or his family members who belonged to the tribe of Quraysh. And the tribe of Quraysh, they were one of the head tribes in Arabia at the time. And one of the biggest tasks or the biggest things that they held dear as a part of faith was the pilgrimage to Mecca and worshiping around the Kaaba. And the Kaaba, if you ever seen the black cube that you see shown in Mecca, and all Muslims face that in prayer. It was a house of worship for the Arab at the time, or even predated the birth of the Prophet Muhammad, since the time of Abraham and Ishmael. It was a place of worship and a place to make pilgrimage to. So at the time of the Prophet Muhammad, as he was, born and lived his early life, he's seen the people worshiping, believing in God, but associating partners with God also. So it is known that, of course, the pagan Arabs had, more than 300 idols that they worship along with God. So the Prophet Muhammad never worshipped these idols. He always contemplated, is that correct faith? He always contemplated their, incorrect belief, or the worshiping other idols besides Allah, besides the one true God, or the one worthy of worship. And so close to, I believe it was his 40 years of age, the angel Gabriel had came to him and commanded him to speak or to recite. And he said that he is not other reciters. And of the first verses in the Quran that was revealed was Iqra bismi rabbika alladhi khalaq, read in the name of your Lord. And so after the angel Gabriel came to him and commanded him to recite, and then the Quran had begun to be revealed to him, he returned back home to his wife Khadija, and he went to her for comfort, and he discussed with her what he had experienced, and she said that, let me take you to my uncle Waraqa, who is a wise believer in the message of Christ, of Jesus, and he will give you some advice and talk to you about what you had experienced. And when he went to Waraqa ibn Nawfal, he had said to Muhammad, the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, that what you had experienced is similar to no different than what the previous prophets and messengers had experienced. And he said, if I was a young man, I would accompany you on your path and witness your people to expel you. And then at the time, the Prophet Muhammad was, all through his life, he was trustworthy. He was known not to lie, but the people wouldn't accept this message to worship one God alone. So at that time, he couldn't believe, why would the people expel him? And he said that basically you're telling them to worship God and leave off idolatry. And just like the previous prophets and messengers, they were all rejected by their people. So you too will be rejected by your people. So that was the starting of the message of Islam, or the sitting of the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him.
Okay, great. All right, so we're going to dive now into kind of more of the doctrinal questions. So for those of you who are maybe just joining us, the purpose of doing this is really to kind of learn the real basics of Islam regarding 8 issues that I think really define and distinguish any religion from another. And that's their view of nature of God, nature of man, sin, salvation, the fall, creation. And I think all of those sort of things really define what a religion really believes. So with that, we're going to start off into that is, what is the Islamic view of the nature of God?
The nature of God. So to use a term that is said in Arabic, Allah, which is the one worthy of worship, and it's often said by, Muslim people would give the reply that, Arabs in the Muslim world also use the word Allah to mean God. So the basic idea of God is not unsimilar, or I guess you can say the basic idea that Muslims have of God is similar to the idea that Christians have of God. The one who nourishes, the one who sustains, the one who brings things from non-existence into existence, all those type of things. That is how God can be described. And it is said that we have something in Islam called the 99 names of Allah. And so Allah has informed us of 99 names that he may be called upon. And his names are not limited to 99. And there are words such as Ar-Rahman, Ar-Rahim, and Ar-Rahman is the most beneficent. Ar-Rahim is the most merciful. Al-Malik is the king. Al-Quddus is the holy. As-Salam is the giver of peace. So there's 99 names which are all, we would say, perfect, and perfect qualities that exalt God. So all hearing, all knowing, the possessor of greatness, the creator, the omnipotent, the exalted in power and might. So these are attributes of God. And there's one chapter in the Quran, and I hope you don't mind that, I'll refer to some Arabic phrases in the Quran.
Yeah, that'd be
just
great.
If Muslim listeners that might want to hear this and hear it just as a point for them. But there's some verses in the Quran that describe, God's nature or the attributes of God. And that from there, that's where we, have definitions of the 99 attributes of God. And the Quran itself, we believe, is the holy book that was revealed to the Prophet Muhammad by way of Angel Gabriel to tell mankind of God, of the previous nations, and how to be a believer in the message or in God. So there's one verse in the Quran. It says, هو الله الذي لا إله إلا هو الحي القيوم هو الله الذي لا إله إلا هو العالم الغيب والشهادة هو الرحمن الرحيم هو الله الذي لا إله إلا هو الملك القدوس السلام المؤمن المهيمن العزيز الجبار المتكبر سبحان الله عما يشركون هو الله الخالق البارئ المصور له الأسماء الحسنى يسبح له ما في السماوات والأرض وهو العزيز الحكيم. And so that is the Surah Al-Hashr, or the 59th chapter in the Quran, verses 22 to 24. And it says, He is God, He is God, there is no God other than Him. It is He who knows what is hidden as well as what is open. He is the Lord of mercy, the giver of mercy. He is God, there is no God other than Him, the controller, the Holy One, the source of peace, the grantor of security, guardian over all, the mighty and the compeller, the truly great. God is far above anything considered as a partner. He is God, the creator, the originator, the shaper. The best names belong to Him, and everything in heaven and earth glorify Him. He is the mighty, the wise. So the verses like this obviously define the nature of God, and also the way the Quran is laid out. Sometimes, there might be a verse in the Quran about doing good deeds, and it will say, and Allah is the one who hears all things, or the one who sees all. So a lot of verses in the Quran are framed by a subject, and then it's concluded by God's attribute. So it's kind of sort of caps off the topic. It's like, it's like redefining or defining what was just mentioned, to mention God's attributes. So believe that God existed, and so so no one created God. God existed, and then God created mankind. And we are the creation, and God is the creator. And they're two distinct things. And there's a verse in the Quran which also talks about that I guess we can get to that when we talk about the nature of God. So, but the idea of God is perfect, omnipotent attributes, and above flaws and I guess mistakes. So basically anything of flaws and, similar things are not attributed to God, only the best and superlative of all attributes of goodness and greatness.
Got it. Okay. Would you say that God's attributes are part of Him, or are they separate from Him? Like as Christians, we would say God is love, and so like love itself is God. That's not meaning that God has love and it's part of Him, but that actually is Him.
So, is God love? I guess that the framing, I'm not too familiar with how to parse it within Islamic viewpoint, but we say He is Ar-Rahman. He is the most beneficent, the most merciful. So I'm not quite sure if how to define to separate that.
Yeah, and if you don't, that's fine. I realize that we might even go over some questions that you're like, I'm not completely sure even myself, and that's fine.
But there are some things. I mean, there's a concept in Islam So basically, if the term or the phrase or the attribute of God is Ar-Rahman, or the most merciful. So the question that Muslims have sometimes is, can we name our children Rahma or Salam? Because Allah is the superlative of those attributes. So we can. You would just simply not name your child As-Salam or Ar-Rahman, meaning the superlative of that thing. And the way the language is used, you can say, would you be so merciful, or would you be so, or the man showed mercy to the homeless person and gave him money. So, but that is still distinct from God's attribute of being the most merciful. So there's attributes that we see in the world, or in actions of, kindness or mercy or love that we see in the world, but God is the utmost superlative of that description, verb, or attribute. So if that gives any definition, but I'm not quite sure how to answer.
Gotcha. No worries.
God distinct from.
Yeah. So the next part is the view of the nature of man.
So the nature of man, I think Islam would agree, and I think most people would agree that humans are a part of their environment, that which is around them. Often, if a person is in good settings, they can be a good person, and if they're in bad settings, then they could be a bad person. And it is said in the Quran that Allah created man in the best of forms, as it says, لَقَدْ خَلَقْنَا الْإِنسَانَ فِي أَحْسَنِ تَقْوِيمٍ ثُمَّ رَدَدْنَاهُ أَسْفَلَ سَافِلِينَ إِلَّا الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا وَعَمِلُوا الصَّالِحَاتِ So إِلَّا الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا وَعَمِلُوا الصَّالِحَاتِ فَلَهُمْ أَجْرٌ غَيْرُ مَمْنُونٍ. So it says that we have indeed created man in the best of molds. Then they, became in the lowest of states or situations, except. So this verse mentions that God created man in the best of forms, and then they lowered it and debased themselves. There's another chapter in the Quran. It says, وَالْعَصْرِ إِنَّ الْإِنسَانَ لَفِي خُسْرٍ إِلَّا الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا وَعَمِلُوا الصَّالِحَاتِ وَتَوَاصَوْا بِالْحَقِّ وَتَوَاصَوْا بِالصَّبْرِ. That mankind is at verily, by the time all of mankind is at loss, except those who enjoin one another in piety and patience, and those who believe. So these, I guess, attributes of being great or being exalted and in the falling, or being at loss except for those who believe, all the aspects of goodness and guidance and success and prosperity, and all those things are tied to faith and good deeds. So people can be good, they can be bad based on their environment, but it's still ultimately by God's will and knowledge how a person's life would be. So the nature of man, I guess you can also say, people or mankind, men and women, are hasty, they're forgetful, and sometimes they are ungrateful, except those who basically contemplate God and do righteous deeds. So you'll find in Islam, most of the time in the Quran, it'll always mention, or often mention, belief, and good deeds, and good deeds. Also tied with that is patience. Also tied with that is giving charity. So I guess to tie, concepts of faith with mankind in total, I guess we're all those things. We're forgetful, we're hasteful, we're lustful, we're desirous, but only the people who have faith and and contemplate God as much as they can are the ones who will be successful enough to get beyond that and be a good person, or be a good believer.
So you started to even hit on this a little bit. So what might be good to transition from that is the view of sin.
Mm-hmm. So the view of sin is, so the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, was asked by one of his companions. He was asked, what is sin? And from his disciples, they would always ask him questions because they wanted to know how to live their faith, how to decide things in their life. Even some disciples or some companions were not in the circle of the Prophet Muhammad all the time. Some of them lived far away, and it took some time for them to travel, by camel, by horse through the desert to be with the Prophet, and then they would leave to go back to their people. So it wasn't that they would always be around him. So sometimes they would ask a question to get right to the point, and they would take that back to their people and live or teach by the knowledge that they had, even if it was a little bit. So this companion had asked the Prophet basically the idea that, what is sin? And he said that sin is that which, in the paraphrasing the meaning, that sin is what makes the heart feel discomfort, and it circles around the heart and makes you have regret regarding, if you can say. And another hadith or another saying that we have is that if you have no shame, then do as you please. So if something is sinful, then you, for the most part, won't want people to know about it, unless a person is their heart is so far gone and corrupt that they have no. Unfortunately, we have apps and social media programs today that allow a person to show or say anything about themselves or other people, and it's boasted, it's resent, and there's no shame in it. But the concept of sin is primarily, if your heart has some wholesomeness or goodness in it, it is simply something that you don't want people to know about, and it is something that doesn't allow you to rest easy at night. So, for example, let me think. If you were to return, let me think. So I guess the idea that if you felt discomfort about that thing, it is probably something that is sinful. So I can't think of an example. But basically, in our dealings with apps, with new technology, with getting hired to a new job or some new invention, if traversing our way upon those things gives us comfort in our heart, then potentially those things are fine in Islam. But if we have some uneasiness to, have an app that, that maybe takes money away from, I guess you might get the point that anything that we feel regret about or that ashamed about potentially is sinful, and sins can be in multiple different ways. There could be a sin between you and God. So, for example, if God made in the month of Ramadan, for those who are able to fast during the daytime, who are not traveling, who are not breastfeeding, or feel for their infant that that might be in their womb, and they reach the age of puberty, then they are incumbent to fast. So if a person does not fast, it's not against anyone besides God. So that sin in that term would be against God if you do not fulfill the fast. So that's between you and God. And there are other sins which are between you and people. So, for example, if you spoke about someone, if you made lies about them, slander about them, backbite them, or take their property, and that is a sin between you and the other person. So the one sin is to be forgiven from between you and God. And the other sin, it has to be sought forgiveness to that person that you've wronged. So there's sin between you and God, there's sin between you and your fellow man, and in a way, back to the first examples, something that was made you feel uneasy in your heart, and something that you would be ashamed to tell people about, then that potentially also is a sinful action also.
Got it. Okay. So kind of along that line, then, could you explain the Muslim view of the fall?
So, and I hope you don't mind me just giving the paraphrases of the discussion.
Absolutely. That's fine.
And again, there could be doctrinal references that we can refer to this as references. So the idea of the fall, we do believe Adam and Eve were in paradise, and they fell from paradise, and then they began to have their life on earth. And from the two of them, as it mentions, we have they mention that in the Quran that mentions that from the two of them, God created many men and women throughout the earth. So they're the first man, the first woman, and from them we all came from. And they did fall from heaven, and they fell because they disobeyed God's command to stay away from uh, the tree or the fruit that God had forbidden them to eat from. And we do believe that Satan came to whisper to them and, promised them that they would receive goodness and have, God's mercy and so on if they ate from the tree. So from the concept of sin, the first topic we had in the fall, sometimes it isn't that, I think in Christian you believe also, sometimes it isn't that, if we're a good person, it isn't that we're told to do the utmost sin and we'd obey Satan's whisper. That is not how, Satan would get someone who is conscious about God to sin. So it would be said that, for example, you will gain goodness, or you will gain something from this sin that Satan is trying to tell you to do. So anyhow, I kind of went off on that point, but so basically, Adam and Eve did fall from paradise. They did disobey God's command. Satan did tempt them to disobey God, and now we're living a life on earth and trying to return back to paradise, to be in the gardens of paradise in the presence of God.
Okay, gotcha. All right. So then with that, what is the view of salvation?
So salvation. So as we mentioned, I guess from the Muslim point of view, the concept or the belief that all the prophets and messengers were sent to guide the people to worship God and leave off idolatry. The salvation in this era would be to follow the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, who was the last line of prophets and messengers. And tied with that is to worship God alone and leave off idolatry. So salvation in this era, or in the Ummah, or the nation of the Prophet Muhammad, would be, as I just said, to believe in God, to worship God alone, and to believe in the messenger, to believe in the message and the prophethood of the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him. And a person will not receive the salvation by their good works alone. It is still tied to God's mercy upon them. So it isn't that you amass these your book of good deeds, and God is sort of owed you something. You will still enter paradise or still earn goodness only by God's mercy. So salvation is through God's mercy and by believing in Him and following the Prophet Muhammad in his message. And there's a verse in the Quran. It says, "In kuntum tuhibbunallah fattabi'uni," that if you say you love Allah, then follow me, follow the Prophet. So, you might hear a lot of discussion in Islam about, enumerating prayers to perform, enumerating days to fast. But all these things cannot be done without love of God and hoping in God. And so, it's not just a rote action to perform, but it's also something that has to affect our and come from the heart also. So the idea of sin and falling and the nature of man, it is all still tied to being the best believer in God that you can be. And in this time, it will be following the Prophet Muhammad and believing and worshiping God alone. And it is not enough to just believe in God. And during the time of the Prophet, he was said to the pagan Arabs, they believe in God, but they worship all other idols to seek closest to God also. So it is like, I guess you might understand the fact that, some people, they might believe in God, but they do all these other things to seek intermediaries to God. So again, the concept of God and man is all intertwined. And now in the time of the Prophet Muhammad is simply that: believe in his message, worship God alone, and that's how you seek salvation, by the mercy of God.
Okay. So would you say, like, one of the questions that comes up within Christian theology is a lot of, do you have to perform good works, or is it purely based on faith? And from my understanding with Islam, it seems like it would be pretty well agreed on that, like, acts are necessary for salvation, whether that's just performing the 5 pillars of Islam or various other things, even if you're not necessarily going to pin it down to those 5 pillars, is it pretty well agreed on that there's some level of good works that is required?
Yes. But you might say, for example, if you say, what if someone is bedridden, they can't move a single bone in their body, they can only wink to indicate, words, or, speak with some type of device, what acts would they have? So it isn't, in such a person's case, you can't say, if you can't pray the way we pray, then you wouldn't receive God's salvation. But in a way, the one thing that the acts of worship in Islam, what they do is they fortify a person's faith. So, for example, if you went, we would say, if you went your whole, so good deeds fortify your faith, and good deeds grant you forgiveness for your misdeeds. So, in a way, we're always amassing mistakes and misdeeds. And perhaps, I'm just saying, like, theoretically, if you didn't have something to wipe away those misdeeds, then your misdeeds would amass. And the one thing that would wipe away those misdeeds are the good deeds, are the prayer, is a pilgrimage, is a giving charity. So in a way, it cleans your slate of your misdeeds, and it also guides you to better deeds. So, it's definitely something that has a number. You can enumerate it. It is a part of faith, but it isn't just the numbers. It is something that purifies your faith and moves you on to another level. So even if that person was, for example, bedridden, they would still be counted as a believer because they believed and they were not able to do any actions. So I guess I'm saying that the actions are to be performed, but it bolsters a person's belief in ways that aren't just, check boxes on a number of prayers that you do throughout the day. It is actually something that strengthens your faith. It allows you to be forgiven for your misdeeds, and it pushes you along to become, to a greater level of iman. So perhaps it takes you to a level that you wouldn't reach just by saying I believe, So it does two things. It fills, check boxes, if you will, and the other thing is that it pushes you along in faith because you're doing those things.
Okay.
So yeah, you to have in Islam, concept of belief and actions.
Got it. Okay. All right. So then another question would be view of creation, which we hit on a little bit with the nature of God, but maybe even with that would I don't know if this is really that interesting to people, but even like old earth, new earth, that's something that I think we get asked a lot. I think our view of how creation happened as Christians and Muslims is pretty well in agreement. But I know whether it's old earth or young earth ends up being a thing in real debate among Christians.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm somewhat curious, and expound on anything else about creation as well that you think would be important for people to know. But that in particular, I think would be an interesting point.
So one, I guess, as you said, there's probably a lot of it that we would agree with. There's a verse in the Quran which talks about one of the prophets were sent to one of the rulers, and he said that his Lord is the one who gives life and causes death. And the ruler said, he was a tyrannical ruler, Pharaoh type person, and he brought about two people. And he said, I will give this person life, basically allow them to live, and I'll kill this person. So I am the one who gave life and death in that situation. And then it was said to the same person, my Lord is the one who brings the sun from the east to the west. So in a way, in that situation, it's sort of talking about, how the Creator is, not just the one who, and I guess back to the idea of the attributes of God, are they separate or together with God, or can we embody, attributes of God, so to speak? But the concept of creation is that, number one, I guess we're different and separate from God. We are the creation, God is created, and God brings things from out of existence into existence. And in the creation, a lot of verses in the Quran talks about if you have faith or if you reflect, then you will see signs of God around you in the creation. And there are many verses about the moons, the stars, the constellation, the alternation of the day and the night and the day. All these things are creations that make you reflect on the Creator. And it is said, someone I was listening to a lecture today. Actually, the person was saying that a person who is atheist is a person who believes that there is no God. And from his point of view, from Islamic point of view, it could be said that they don't think that God exists, and we would think that atheists don't exist, because the concept of when you are in extreme need, need, and you're in despair, and as they say, there are no atheists in foxholes, then there is something within yourself that innately calls upon a creator or something that is far greater than yourself for help and aid and assistance. But the idea of old earth and new earth, I think you might have to revisit that topic with me, and if I can reply to Islam's concept of that.
Okay, got it. All right, next question would be.
Oh,
yeah.
Could you, if you could mention about new earth and old earth, just so I can reply to that.
Yeah. So the old earth and the young earth, basically the different views within Christianity is one looking at the genealogies as recorded in Genesis, as well as the other genealogies in the Old Testament, and basically saying from that we're going to date everything, and also take that the creation narrative in Genesis 1 is literal 24-hour period for each of the 6 days of creation. Therefore, the earth is only 6,000 years old. And then there's the other view that might look at it and say, actually, the word day in Genesis 1 isn't literally a 24-hour period. It could mean longer. So we actually agree with what science says is how old the earth is, and therefore the earth can still be old. And those are kind of the two different camps that people fall into. Neither of them are really saying Scripture's wrong. They're looking at it and saying there's a different way to interpret it. And based on that, they're coming to a view of an old earth or a new earth. So,
so in Islam, with the creation of man, we don't believe that that was the start of the creation of God. We do believe that there were creations of God that were called to worship God alone before the creation of Adam, and one of them, or at least one of them, can be termed as the jinn. And the jinn, we believe, are creatures that basically, if you can say, live a life similar to humans. There are some who are good, some who are bad, those who believe in God, those who disbelieve in God, but we cannot see them readily in our life. And before the creation of Adam, jinn did exist. And when God had made Adam, the angel asked God, will he create a creature that would cause corruption and mischief and bloodshed, while they, the angels, they only mention God's praise and obey his command? So the scholars of Islam, hearing the angels, or seeing that the angels had asked God about, will the humans create bloodshed like, or cause bloodshed like another creation that existed, then there are some texts or some mentioning that this existence that did cause bloodshed and mischief was the jinn. So definitely from our point of view that we have now, and the Quran doesn't talk about the creation of if you will say like dinosaurs or something like that. It doesn't go into detail about that. But as far as the age of the earth and the age of creation and the extent of creation, it's far beyond the existence of humans and what we have on this earth. And as it can easily be said, it's far beyond the creation of our universe. But as far as given the age, we do echo the same idea that the time with God is not like the timing that we have. Like in a 24-hour period, you have 24 hours, and every hour has 60 minutes. Every hour has 60. Every minute has 60 seconds, and so on. That timing with God is still different. So if you have some sayings of the Prophet or mentioning in the Quran about days and nights, with Allah or in the afterlife, it is still not to be contemplated as we have in our life today. So just simply saying that the creation of the earth is old, the creations of God were around before the time of the creation of Adam. Those called to believe did exist before the creation of Adam, and timing is similar, basically, not the same as 24-hour-day period that we have, but the timing with God is much more longer, or the timing in afterlife is much more longer. So that gives some idea, but not particularly about the old earth, new earth concept.
Got it. So, I mean, along that line, somebody was asking, does Islam have a specific view on evolution? Because that ends up being another hot topic within Christianity, is maybe, it seems like the creation narrative maybe rules out the possibility that evolution could even happen. And then people want to say that Christianity is against science because of that.
Yeah. I found that actually some of the, I have watched some Christian thinkers talk about it on YouTube, because in a way it's the same discussion that Muslim would have. The basic idea is that the basic concept of how the idea of evolution would be un-Islamic is to believe that basically, if it were to be said, Adam was the first man, was an amphibian-like creature that came out of the water or something like that. So was that Adam? And we would say no. In the Quran, it talks about the creation of Adam, that Allah created Adam in his form. So it wasn't that Adam came from one form, or the ancestors of Adam came from water and then walked on land and then went upright and then turned to an ape and then turned to Adam, somewhere along the line. But the main idea is that Adam was created in the form that God created him in. So the concept is that he was created in the form of a man. And to believe, conversely, that Adam was, I don't know what evolution, I guess they might not believe in, I'm not sure if they would be all categorized as atheists, or how would the concept of evolution of man and Adam, do you know how Christians who would believe in evolution of man would tie that into the creation of Adam? Like, where would be the connection point between the two?
That's where it does get dicey. So this is where, as Christians, I think it's easier for us to reconcile and say, okay, you can be a Christian and believe in the old earth, but saying you're a Christian and you believe in evolution becomes more of a problem, because it seems two things. One, if God did create Adam out of dirt, which it seems like what he does, it doesn't seem like there's a death period going on, which is how evolutionarily humankind comes about. And it seems like what the creation story is then saying in Genesis is not until the fall does that sort of death really happen to mankind. But I think how evolutionists theistic evolutionists, as we'd call it, how they kind of reconcile that is ultimately like the creation process wasn't done until that final stage of the evolutionary timeline hit. And then that first person that was the climax of humankind actually evolving to as we know humankind now, that was the first Adam.
Mm-hmm.
So
yeah, and so I guess the problem, not the problem, but the issue really is, the evolution of man. I think, even with modern day science or modern day examples of creatures, for example, I was watching the documentaries about Chernobyl and finding out how animals have adapted and live in new environments and situations, then it is quite understandable that, yes, creatures will change and will adapt. And we do believe that the Creator would give them the ability to do so. But the big topic is mainly, when it's talk about evolution, it's the evolution of man, and where does man come from, and are we all descendants of apes and so on. So Islam nominally would disagree with the concept, and perhaps you would, I haven't heard of it, but you perhaps within a framework where you have, some Muslim thinkers might want to combine the theory, and perhaps they might say, for example, I haven't heard it, but it could be how you merge the two timelines or the two things. Yes, there was a man came out of the water, and then God created Adam in the form that he exists today. But I haven't heard of any Muslims kind of merging the two. But we do have the belief or the concept that mankind did not evolve from apes or an amphibia-like creature, or that Adam did not have that resemblance or was not that type of creature. So I would say it's similar to the theistic point of view of in Christendom, perhaps.
Gotcha. Okay. All right. So next two, maybe you just merge them together, or do them separate. Views on heaven and hell.
So heaven and hell. There's a saying of the Prophet Muhammad that talks about paradise, or in Arabic it's called Jannah, Jannah. And Jannah, if a word in Arabic has the letters J and H or J and A, it is often termed as something that you cannot see. So jinn, as we talked about, jinn, the creation of God, you cannot see jinn, but they have a parallel universe they live in. Janine, or the kind of the infant, or the womb, or the I guess what's in the womb you can't see. And with modern technology, you can ultrasound and so on, but you can't see it. And also Jannah, it is something that you can't see in this life. So it is something that no eye has seen, nor heart has imagined. Something that no eye has seen, nor heart has imagined or desired. And we do believe that those who do good works and those who have righteous deeds, God has prepared for them in the afterlife. And it's also often mentioned in the Quran, gardens underneath which rivers flow. And sometimes, I often think about that, the verse in the Quran which talks about that, gardens in the paradise underneath which rivers flow. I think water is something that humans have a desire to be around. So, when you often go, if you have relatives or someone who comes to Colorado for a picnic, you don't particularly take them to a picnic area that's in Brush, Colorado, or in the middle of none, where there's just dry dirt and nothing there. You often try to look for a place that has water or moving water, and it kind of gives you a feeling of life, to be invigorated, and it's kind of something to awe at. And if we look at the wonders of the world, of course Niagara Falls is a place that people go to a lot. So just when I read or hear the verses in the Quran that talk about gardens underneath which rivers flow, it is something that even in this life, humans like to be around water. We're amazed at water, and water features is something that we like to watch and visit. So anyhow, there are verses in the Quran which talk about in paradise there are gardens underneath which rivers flow. In paradise, there is what no eye has seen nor heart has desired or imagined. It talks about fruit and relaxation in paradise, and contemplating on your previous life or the fruit that you're given in paradise. It'll be in a way similar to what you have on earth, but is still something different. So you might call it an apple in this life, for example, but in the paradise it'll be something even better, and what far surpasses what you have in this life. And it talks about in the Quran that you will see your loved ones in paradise, and you'll be given garments to wear in paradise. And it also talks about how trees in paradise, they are as wide as it would take a riding animal or a horse. It would take it hundreds of years or many, many years to pass through its shade or through its circumference of a tree. So, it is what, as I said, no eye has seen nor heart has imagined. And in paradise, there will be no bad words said or no evil thoughts imagined. And sometimes it's you might hear a question about, for example, seeing someone in paradise that you didn't like. So the concept of someone you didn't like, or someone that there will be no concept of kind of retribution, it's a place of love, of peace, and being in the company of God. So all those type of things. And hell is, of course, the opposite. In hell, it is in the Quran, in the sayings of the Prophet. Hell is described as a place, of course, of punishment, of torture, of isolation. One of the things that in this life, sometimes going through hardships, it is made easier when we're around people, or going through COVID, for example. They say we're all in it together, so that a person wouldn't think that COVID was so bad, just to name a dilemma that we're going through right now, because we're all going through the same thing. But in hell, people will be isolated, and that will be one of the things that would make it more unbearable, because you're not supported by the people around you, or you're not, getting that support that normally would make you feel better or comforted. And both of them are everlasting, paradise and the hellfire. And to enter paradise, we believe that only the people who would worship God alone and leave off idolatry are the people who will enter paradise. So in the time of the Prophet Muhammad, those will be those who believe in him and follow his message. The time of Jesus, the ones who believe in him and follow his message. The time of Moses, the ones who believe in him and follow his message, and so on. And if it were that a person in their life did not hear of the message of Islam as it came to them, or came to the people at the time of the Prophet messenger that was sent, then God would question them in the afterlife, and the question would prove their devotion to him or their devotion to worship false gods and deities. So both are eternal. One is, of course, eternal bliss. The other is, eternal damnation. And even those who believe in him, or believe in God, and follow the prophet or messenger that was sent at the time, they too may enter paradise. They too may reside in the hellfire until God deems fit that they would be removed from the hellfire and placed in paradise.
Okay. So starting to get into some of the questions people are kind of queuing up. One that's kind of along that line is, what happens to those who were in Islam, were Muslims, and then left the faith? What is the view of that? Both probably in the sense of how you as Muslims then treat them after they've left, and then also what happens to them on an eternal perspective.
So eternally, in God's realm, in the afterlife, then they would be in hell, because then they would be a person who died upon disbelief. And it isn't just enough that a person would be born into a Muslim family, or have a lineage of great people who did great things. There's a saying of the Prophet that says that a person's bloodline or the name won't push them forward, but is their belief and their consciousness of God that will push them forward or make them excel. So I guess having said that, is that a person has to believe in their heart. Islam is definitely a belief that requires a person to believe themselves or have good deeds themselves. It is not something that you are inherited. And so to the question, if someone dies, so I guess the one thing I want to note is the point of death. So that's how the people are judged. So you can be born an XYZ faith person and enter Islam and die upon Islam, then that's how you'll be judged. Or a person in life can go back and forth based on their whims, the difficulties they may face, the environment that they were in. And then once they had died, or just before they died, they had been a believer in Islam, then that's how they will be judged. As far as this life, for the one who would leave Islam, there's some discussion amongst Muslims as to what would happen to that person. There's some mention that the person would be executed, or that they would be killed because, they have denied, they have entered Islam and they've gone on to deny Islam. And there are some who point to the sayings of the Prophet, and when someone had came to him and they had professed belief, and then they had kind of denounced belief, and they left the city, and the Prophet had said words which would mean that the city, I believe it was Mecca or Medina, but the city has a way of expelling people who are, of not good belief or good character. So in that instance, people might say, well, the Prophet didn't ask this person to be brought back or to be punished. He let the person leave because they didn't intend to kind of defame or besmirch Islam at that point. To say, and this goes to a topic that comes up sometimes, Muslims have such a, often Muslims show such emotion when faith is talked about. So if someone were to talk about the Prophet Muhammad, or not just the Prophet Muhammad, even, but that's how it's nominally shown as, that if someone wanted to speak badly about Islam, then the one thing that you would talk about that would, really, make Muslims upset is to talk about the Prophet Muhammad. But it's not just the Prophet Muhammad; it would be the Prophet Muhammad, Prophet Jesus, all the things dear to Islam. So, so the idea would be, well, would that person leave Islam and then speak badly about Islam and badly about the Prophet and badly about Allah? Then that person would deserve punishment for speaking against all things that are holy in Islam. Or would that person simply disbelieve and be to themselves, not be someone who would speak badly or defame Islam? So there's a difference in Islam. I don't know the arguments fully in that to that degree. But as it is nominally today, especially for someone in the U.S., taking laws of Islam in their own hands is not to be done by the common person. So that's one thing. The other thing is that normally in the world, I don't think that there's any country that actually see that the punishment for, it's called ridda, the punishment for leaving Islam is execution, that they actually execute people based on that. I believe on the books, in Pakistan may have it on the books, and Saudi Arabia may have it on the books, I believe. I say on the books to my knowledge, or I'm not sure what that means there, but I do not believe that they actually execute people for that. So to my knowledge, I don't know everything about it. I know that people differ on the concept of people who leave Islam today, but normally people are not executed for their leaving Islam. It is left to God to judge them.
Okay. So a quick one, a few people are asking what denomination, and I don't think that's even the term you guys use. What is the term you use? That'd even be something I wonder.
I guess the word could be sect. Sect would be a good word.
Yep.
I think the word in English would be furqa, I believe, furqa. There are normally two sects in Islam that are known or mentioned most often. It is the Sunni strand of Islam or Shia strand of Islam. And even those divert into different beliefs and factions. So primarily, the origin or the source of Islam is Sunni Islam. And to get into discussion about terms, words, and definitions. So Sunni means the way. That means to follow the way of the Prophet. So Prophet Muhammad. So anyone who would believe in him and follow him would follow his way. They'll follow his Sunnah. It's usually spelled Sunnah. So Muslims follow the Sunnah of the Prophet. No matter what you call yourself, you follow the Prophet's Sunnah. And that means you're a Sunni. So just like someone from Pakistan is Pakistani, someone who is from Bangladesh is Bangladeshi, someone who follows the Sunnah is Sunni, the Y or I-E on the end, or I on the end. So how did the word Shia and Sunni come about to be used? So during the time of Ali, or after the death of the Prophet Muhammad, the family member of Ali was the leader of the Muslims. He was the fourth, Abu Bakr Umar. He was a fourth leader after the death of the Prophet Muhammad. And the people at that time, they began to look back on history and believe that Ali should have been the first person after the death of the Prophet Muhammad to lead the Muslim nation. And from a Sunni point of view, or even from a historical point of view, this concept began when Islam had spread to Persia. And as you see today, a lot of the Shia people who are Shi'i Muslims, they are in Persia. So the concept that the Persians had was that the ruler was part of divinity. So as we would term it from the Sunni point of view, so that belief that rulers were part of divinity bled into the fact that they believe the ruler at that time, Ali, should have had almost a divine nature. Some of them give him a divine nature, and some of them say he simply should have been the ruler after the death of the Prophet Muhammad. Some Shia give their imams attributes of God, such as knowing the unseen and controlling the universe, controlling the creation. So there's strands of them that might believe, yes, he should have been the first ruler, or up until the point that they say their imams control aspects of the universe and have attributes of God. So that's Shia belief. And how those people during the time of Ali showed their loyalty was that they claim Shiatul Ali, or they are the party of Ali. Shiatul Ali, or allegiance to Ali, or the party of Ali. So that's how the word Shia how it had began. But the default is that if you were to ask a Shia person, do you follow the way of the Prophet? They'll say, yeah, we follow it. Do you follow his sunnah? Yes, we follow it. Are you a Sunni? We're not a Sunni in that term, but we follow his way. So that's, the word, the Arabic meaning, a short blurb of history. And so to say that, I and our center and most people in the world, I think it said that the Shia population in the world is close to 15% or 13%. And most people in America most Muslims in America are Sunni Muslims.
Okay, gotcha. All right, I'm going to jump to a different question. This one I don't even fully understand, so hopefully this makes sense to you. Can you ask him during end of prayer, why is salam given to the left and the right?
Yes, so once the prayer is finished, the phrase or the greeting of Islam is Assalamu alaikum. That's may God's peace and blessing be upon you. And so when the prayer is done, they say Assalamu alaikum, Assalamu alaikum, or Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. I'm not sure of the answer. Some people say it's, I'm not sure of the answer.
Okay, that's totally fine. All right, another question is, what reliable historical evidence outside of Islamic literature do you have that states Jesus was not crucified? So understand that the Islamic view is that Jesus didn't actually die on the cross, and I think there's different ways of viewing what that actually means, but it's agreed upon, at least in Islam, that he didn't die.
So aside from the Quran, we have the sayings of the Prophet Muhammad. Those are the two religious texts. I haven't gone into the topic from a Muslim point of view in depth or in detail, and I do believe, even as far as Indians and they have some idea or some belief about it. But I haven't researched it. I don't know anything to that level, but I just have the references of Quran and the sayings of the Prophet Muhammad about it.
Okay, got it. All right, another question was, I guess those ones we've actually already covered. Hold on. There was one other that I know I was seeing. Guys, if you got any more questions, go ahead and throw them in there, but I think we may have covered. The other one was, how did Muhammad see Jesus? What does that mean? I think probably my understanding is that was maybe part of the night vision, that he saw Jesus during that.
Yeah. So we do believe that, I guess how he saw him. There is some, Islamic thought in regards to the night journey, Isra wal Mi'raj, as it's called, the night journey and the ascension to the heavens, to the levels of paradise. Even there is a discussion in Islam, and it's not what was intended or meant, but some people even question, did Muhammad see Allah without a barrier? And so the belief in that is that we say Allah is Nur, or Allah is light, in a way that, the creation of humans as we exist today, we're not able to live the existence in paradise as we are in this form. So in the afterlife, our bodies will be changed, or in a form that could endure eternity or endure the paradise, if you will. So there's the idea that in the night journey, or the Isra wal Mi'raj, I'll just use the term, that Muhammad did not see God with his eyes, but it was through a veil or a hijab, as it's called. So some people just, there's Islamic thought about that. Did he see God's with his eye, or was he in the presence of God and didn't see God directly with his eye? But as far as the prophets and messengers, or on the night journey, I do not know how it would be defined as to how he saw the prophets and the messengers that he saw, how he saw the visions or the items that he saw on that night, or if the person means how did the Prophet Muhammad see Jesus. In another term, it will be that he saw him as a prophet of God, as someone who was sent, who was of a miraculous birth, born to the Virgin Mary, given miracles to show God's honor and greatness. And so, yeah, from that point of view, he's a prophet and messenger of God, if it were to mean see in that way. But if it meant see in the other way, I don't know how it could be said or defined how he saw him in the night journey, but we simply have to believe that he saw him, or he saw the ways that God had willed or decreed.
Got it. Okay. This might be the last question, at least of the ones that people they're chatting it up, but I'm not necessarily seeing the questions unless they put it into the right little thing. So this might be the last one, but what does Islam say about the devil?
So there's a term in, I'm not sure where it originates. I think I Googled it before. In Christendom, where's the term come from? It says the devil is a lie. Is that an exact quote from the Bible, or is that the concept? The devil is a lie.
Is a lion?
He is L-I-E. The devil lies, or he is.
Oh,
a lie.
yeah, he is a liar. We'd even say he's the father of lies.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So the devil, we believe that he is of the creation of the jinn, as we mentioned before, and the devil was around during the creation of Adam, and God had commanded the devil to, I guess you can say at that time he wasn't to be termed as the devil, because at that time he had reached a level of closest to God at that time, or before his fall, I guess you could say, or before his disobeying of God's command. So at the time, Iblis, and that's a term that's used in Arabic, Iblis, was in the presence of the angels in paradise. And when God had created mankind, had created Adam, the angels asked, will you create a person who will create mischief and bloodshed? And then God said, verily I know what you know not. And God had commanded Iblis, or Satan, to bow down to Adam. And Satan disobeyed God's command and said that basically I am better than him. I am created from fire and he is created from clay or dirt, or sounding dirt or sounding clay or soil. So he felt that he was better than Adam, and he did not feel that he should obey God's command. And at that point, then that's when he became the rejected, or the devil, if you want to say. And he asked for permission from God to misguide mankind. And God had given him that ability, but said that he would not be able to misguide those who were truly obedient and reflectors upon God. So I guess that's the start of, not to use the word fall of Satan, but the start of, the going astray of Satan, and the intent to misguide the children of Adam. And it's said that out of jealousy and out of hatred, and often Muslims say, just to use a word that we use today, racism. People say that Satan was the first racist, because just how someone was created, Iblis Satan said that he was better than the other person or better than Adam. So that's the idea concept of Satan. He can, I guess there's mention in the Quran or mention in the time of the Prophet Muhammad that Satan had taken the embodied form and sought to misguide mankind in different places and times. But we also have jinn who do the work of Satan. We also have humans who do the work of Satan. So, sometimes the word devils are used. So it could mean people who do bad works or the works of the devil. And it often doesn't mean the devil himself. So, so that's a concept that sometimes Muslims misunderstand, that it isn't always Satan that would misguide people. It is the people who do Satan's work that will misguide people. So that's a concept of, and then we do not believe that Satan was, as I mentioned, he was a jinn. We do not believe that he was an angel or a fallen angel. But we do believe that he was a devout servant of God, a worshiper of God, but then went astray when he saw himself better than the creation of Adam.
Okay, gotcha. That is interesting.
So in a way that the theme is the same, if you will. Devout to God, then went astray. But we say that devoutness wasn't that he was an angel, but that he was a jinn. But same devotion, then astray, and lead a man astray. That part is the same, I guess.
Gotcha. Okay. Yeah, that's interesting. I didn't realize that there was a different view of kind of his origin, that he's not an angel in Islam. I did not know that.
Yeah. There's some mentioning that. So the Quran often mentions a topic, but it doesn't mention the topic completely in one chapter or another chapter. So in one chapter, it mentions that Iblis was among the angels. So it could be thought, well, among them means that he was one of them. But then in another chapter, it says that he was from the jinn. So he was among the angels, but he was a jinn. He reached a high level of devotion to God that he was among their company, but then he fell from that level by disobeying God and vowing to misguide man for the rest of the time.
Okay. So a question, I guess, along the lines of what we maybe agree on. One of the things that's interesting is that I think especially a lot of Christians that have not studied Islam are shocked to hear is that Islam does believe that Jesus is Messiah. In a sense, you don't mean it in the same way that we do, but you do believe he's Messiah, and you also believe that he's going to come back in the second coming. So could you tell us a little bit about the belief of when Jesus comes back in the second coming, what that's going to look like?
Yeah. So there's an entire chapter in the Quran called Surah Maryam, the chapter of Maryam or the chapter of Mary. And it talks about, the Virgin Mary and her devotion to God and her family. And so, I encourage, anyone who wants to read it to take a look at that chapter in the Quran. It's called Mary. And I don't find that there's a lot in the chapter that Christians would find disagreeable. And even, so we do believe in Mary and Jesus and so on. So we do believe that he was not crucified. We believe that he was taken unto God and protected from his persecutors, and that before his captors were to come, he prayed to God and asked for God's protection and mercy in that situation. And just to use one phrase, just the concept from the Bible, it mentions the belief or the idea that God heard his prayer. So Muslims, just on that, we would say, God hears everything. But if it were to be mentioned that God heard something, it would not only be said that God was to fulfill what was requested. So Muslims believe that Jesus was protected from his persecutors, but the one who was crucified was someone who was one of Jesus' disciples. And so there's a saying of the Prophet, which mentions the idea that Jesus stood before his disciples and asked who would take his stead on the cross. and be with him in paradise. And there's a young man from amongst the disciples who stood up and said, I will take their place on the cross. And then Jesus, of course, he kind of refused his offer because, he was a young man, and the person might say, well, this person has a lot more to live or to give in life. It won't be you. And then it was asked a second time, who will take my stand on the cross? Then the young man stood up, and then he would refuse. And the third time, Jesus asked, who would take my stand on the cross? And the third time, the young man stood up, and then he was given the honor of taking the stead of Jesus on the cross. And he was made to the people to appear to be Jesus himself. So that's the crucifixion, taken up into God, and he will return at the end of time. And we do believe that he will return. And once he returns, not once he returns, but at his return, the Antichrist will be on earth. And the Antichrist will be given the ability to deceive people, to call people to worship him. And he will tell the people that he is God, and the people will, not all of them, but the people will believe him. And he will be given the ability to make it appear as though someone's parents who had been deceased, that they will stand before them. And they would say, this God, or God has resurrected me, something like that. This is the God to worship. He has brought us back to life. And if a person were to see their parents come to life and to call the person to worship the Antichrist, then it will be hard for a person who wasn't aware of the signs of the Antichrist, or the signs of the hour coming, to disbelieve in that call to worship the Antichrist. So there will be a time of bloodshed, of turmoil, of chaos, of confusion. The Antichrist would be on earth, and then Jesus will descend. And there is mentioning in the Hadith or the sayings of the Prophet that he would descend in Damascus. And so, in Christendom and in Judaism and Islam, obviously area that is under much contention today, are the Holy Lands. And we believe that a lot will occur there, and a lot has transpired there, and that will be the place where Jesus will return. So he will return in the future, and we do believe. So back to the idea of how did Muhammad, peace be upon him, see Jesus, peace be upon him. So when Jesus returns, we believe that he will return, and he will pray. So there's one instance when he will return. The people will be preparing to make the prayer, the morning prayer. And they would want Jesus to lead the prayer. And then he will say that the prayer has been called for you. Excuse me. So one thing from that which is to transpire is that one thing to grab from that, I guess, is that even though Jesus will return, he will pray behind the leader of the Muslims from the Ummah, or the nation of the Prophet Muhammad. So in that, he is, showing worship, praying together, worshiping the same God, but still showing honor and veneration to the prophethood and the message of the Prophet Muhammad. So we believe he will return, and then after that, the Antichrist will be slayed. He will live and die a natural death, and there will be a period of prosperity on the earth. And then after that, so I guess that's one topic, return of Jesus, the Antichrist, a time of prosperity. And then there will come a time where all the righteous people on earth will die, and there will be left just the worst and most wretched people on earth. And then upon them will the last hour will transpire. So basically the end of time, or end of humanity, will come at that time.
Got it. Okay. So I'll just throw out one more question. There's a few that people are starting to ask more directly to me, and I want to respect your time. So I'll ask this one and kind of end time with you, and then I might do some more with some other people after that. So the last one that I wanted to get into, and this in some ways I think is more clarifying questions that we've already kind of covered. But what is the view of justice in Islam? How is justice kind of served? Because I think this is coming from a Christian, if I'm correct. And from a Christian viewpoint, we're looking at it and saying atonement, Christ's death on the cross, is what brings justice, because Christ takes care of the injustice through his death on the cross. How is justice kind of served in the Islamic view?
So I guess in the Muslim view, justice can be, can occur in this life. It can be done, by way of, if someone harmed you, then they would be, if you will, sent to jail because of, the harm they did to you. So there is some form of justice that can be done with the legal parameters that might exist in society, or, the justice that you can give to other by returning something that was their right or their due. So if you took something from someone that belonged to them, and you took it to yourself, you can return it to them as a way of justice. We do believe that that God had put us on earth as vicegerents to do justice in God's work. There's also a verse in the Quran. It said that, had not there been, paraphrasing, had not there been people on earth or authorities, then houses of worship, synagogues, and churches would have been torn down. So there are people on earth to do justice, to do goodly works, and to protect those who are lesser, and to return the right of those who have been, the rights who have been taken, and so on. So it can happen in this life, in the realm that we have, or the ability that we have to enact justice. But the ultimate justice, we believe, will transpire in the afterlife. And I think that people who believe in the afterlife, or the day of judgment, or to be held account for your actions in this life, I think it is a justice that people who are atheists are not afforded to understand or to believe in, or they don't think it transpires. So the concept would be that if there's no ultimate justice, then what prevents you from exacting justice in the way that you feel fit? And people might say, "Oh, well, faiths have caused the most bloodshed in the world. So, in the world, and by far, the most bloodshed that's been caused on earth are, atheistic point of views, and for things other than God, you could say wealth, money, power, and those type of things. So those are the ways that, by far, more blood was waged, not in the path of religion, but it was things other than religion and secularism and just anything else. So how would you believe, I guess if someone didn't believe in God or didn't believe in the afterlife, there's no way that they can rationalize that the one who was harmed would get justice. So then, maybe it's not exactly the same, but I guess I would say the only way to find justice is to do it yourself. So then you can have anarchy. So if I didn't believe in a supreme justice, and I have to get retribution for harm that was done to me, or harm that was done to my country, or harm that was done to my loved one. But in the Islamic point of view, it is that you give up this, I guess, feeling that you have to give retribution to believe that God is the one who will bring justice. And it could be in this life through the forms of, authorities that you might live under, courts, policing, and so on, or what God brings to come about in this world. So as it's called karma, for example, you might see videos on YouTube. They're called instant karma. And of course, probably even as Christians, we don't use the word karma because that doesn't necessarily give the idea that there is a God or a creator. But some things happen in this life that correct, I guess, the misdeeds or the transgressions. But then in the afterlife is the ultimate justice, the ultimate balancing of scales from those who were harmed and those who did the harming. And as far as, I guess, we do not have the concept of, the idea of Jesus Christ standing on the cross for the sins of people, but we believe that simply the one who will bring justice and the ultimate justice will be done in the afterlife. And still, it's an interesting concept to believe or to think about. If you don't believe in God or the afterlife, then where is the justice, and how will you exact that justice? And it goes from there. And I think that is what we see around ourselves, around our world. People enacting justice or finding their own resolution to things, and it causes only more corruption and bloodshed. But sometimes I think the only resolve or the best contentment in your heart is that God is the one who will bring justice. And no matter what you can do to a person, the justice of God is much more fair and appropriate than what you can imagine.
Gotcha. All right. Well, thank you, Shakir. It's a pleasure as always, just to be able to chat with you and to get in these conversations. So I really appreciate you coming and joining us. I'm going to be continuing to do some more videos like this if you guys are watching on YouTube in the future here. I have a Mormon that will hopefully be joining me in the next couple of weeks, and you guys are welcome to join on TikTok with that as well. So this is a series just kind of getting through different world religions' view on heaven, hell, creation, nature of God, nature of man, sin, salvation, and the fall. So hopefully this is interesting to you. Pass it on to others. If you know somebody you think would be good for me to connect with on another religion, I would love to connect with them. Definitely looking for someone who's Sikh, who's Hindu, who's Buddhist, Shintoism, different native religions as well. As many of that variety as I could get, I want to talk with people of those different faiths, Judaism. So hopefully this has been enjoyable for you, helpful, a good resource, and we'll catch you again next time over YouTube.